So after that interruption, welcome to the conclusion of this series of the Practice Corner. I thought for the last remaining episodes we will look at some case studies, learning or using what we've already learned and studied in this series, how to change chords, progressions, those sorts of things, strumming patterns, etc. As a disclaimer for this episode as well, I've also got a condenser mic set up here because I know I've had some complaints from some viewers, and quite rightly so as well, on the quality of my audio. So I'm trying an experiment today because, well, you know, I can't afford great microphones just yet to clip on to do Bluetooth, so I'm having to work with what I've got right now. But again, if you have any suggestions, please feel free to let me know in the comments how I can improve. We'll just see how this goes as an experiment. I'll also do this in the practice corner too as well. This is normally a condenser mic that I use for recording my demos, etc. So, which can also be found on my channel if you're interested too. Live Forever is a very easy song. It's a very great one to get involved with, first of all, because there's a mixture of just open chords there in a way. Really, the structure of the song is very simple. If you're just listening to it, really, we have basically, you're going to be able to learn 3 progressions. So a verse progression, you're then going to have to learn a chorus, which is very similar, almost identical to that of the verse, but with 1 chord substituted out, and a slightly different turnaround, of course, to get back into the verse, but we'll discuss that in the practice corner. The solo section, we'll look at solo work in the next series of Back to the Drawing Board when I get back to doing that, looking at theory and pentatonic shapes, and we'll probably look at that in the next series of the practice corner. For now, I want to just work on what we've learned as a rhythm player. You may want to sing along to this as well. If you like singing, then by all means knock yourself out. I'm terrible, and my last YouTube short as well was pretty bad as well, but you know, hey, that's life. And the solo is basically the same as the verse progression, and then finally the outro, which is basically the turnaround for the chorus repeated over again. So it's a very simple song that follows this formula. So without further ado, let me wipe down the board and let's have a look in depth at the strumming pattern and the progression for that of the verses. Okay, so for the verse progression of Live Forever, we have 4 bars of the following chords. And I'm going roughly on that of a 90 BPM tempo, if you like. So when I'm playing these at the practice corner, the metronome will be fixed at 90 BPM, which is important for timing and when you're tapping the foot to get an internal metronome going. So we have 1 bar of G major, followed by 1 bar of D major, followed by 1 bar of A minor, followed by the final bar of this particular part of the progression of a split measure involving, to look at it there, C major to then D major, and then you repeat this to go back to your G before you move on to the chorus section. The typical type of strumming pattern I like to go for here is something that might sound a lot like this. You can do whatever you like, really. In a way, I like to play a 16th note feel over this, so I have like a taka ta, ka taka ta, taka 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 ta, ka taka 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 taka. So this is like 1/8 note here, ta ka ta. The little dot here indicates that this half beat note is slightly longer in a way, really, or half its value longer, if you like. In other words, basically there's a little pickup kind of like chord to play here when you're playing a particular type of rhythm. This is worth bearing in mind roughly when we come to the split measure. You'll get a feel for this. The D chord doesn't exactly come on the 3rd beat. It comes slightly before that if you listen to the track. But again, you'll get a feel for this as you play more of it and as you listen more of it. In a way, really, it comes a little bit early. Whatever rhythm track you go for, whatever rhythm feel you go for is what you should go for in a way, really. So let's take that and let's demonstrate that at the practice corner. Okay, so let's have a look at the verse for Oasis' song Live Forever. So the progression starts on a G major chord, and we looked at open major and minor chords in an earlier lesson of this lesson series, which I will link in one of the top corners. And the G major variant we are going to use is where we take the second, just very quickly as well, where we take the second finger and place it on the 3rd fret of the E string, giving us the G note. But then use the pad of this finger to mute the A string. Then we have an open D and an open G. We then take our 3rd and 4th finger and we fret the 3rd fret of the B and E string to give us D and G. In the second bar of the progression, we then move to the D major shape, where we keep the 3rd finger fixed where it is and we move the fingers round to get you this shape, and we only attack the top 4 strings. So this will be the open D string. We then should have the index finger placed on the 2nd fret of the G string, giving us A. The 3rd finger, which does not move, so it will pivot from the G major to the D, keep the D in there, and we should now have our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the E string, giving us F sharp. And that's D major. The 3rd chord of the verse progression then moves to an A minor shape, which looks like this. And that's where we have an open A. We then should have the 2nd and 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the D and G string, giving us E and A respectively. We then have our index finger on the 1st fret of the B string, giving us a C note. And also we have an open E. A minor. For the final bar of the progression before it repeats the cycle, we now play a split measure. So to begin with, we basically just keep the shape as is there with the A minor, and all we do is we move the 3rd finger from where it was originally, from the A minor, and place this on the 3rd fret of the A string, which gives us an open C major chord. Rather nice. So we've got 2 chord shapes there that pivot, so the G to the D, and then we've got the A minor to that of the C major chord. We play that for roughly 2 beats. So if you remember briefly from the drawing board, we play this briefly for around about 2 beats. I can't remember off the top of my head, but when we do the strumming pattern with this, it will make sense. But the final chord of that for the remaining 2 beats of that bar is back to your D major shape. And then we go back to the G and repeat again, so we have a resolution within that sequence. So currently at the minute I've got a metronome going at about 90 BPM, and if you remember, the strumming pattern we're looking for is going to be down, 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 down. So if we basically tap our foot along with that and play that, or aim for that strumming pattern, we should get the verse progression to sound a lot like this. 3, 4, and that is the verse for Live Forever. After the verse section is done or repeated at least once, we then move on to the chorus. It feels like a chorus, although I'm not entirely sure if it really is a chorus or not with Live Forever. It is exactly the same. The strumming pattern is more or less the same, although don't be afraid to vary and change it up a little bit. It adds rhythmic interest, as long as you stick within the confines of the tempo set by the metronome. This is why I like to practice with metronomes, to kind of keep you in pocket, so to speak. We play exactly the same chord, other than we move to an E minor as opposed to G major. We then move to D major, then to A minor, much like before, and then on the first, we won't repeat this, but on the first pass of this, we're going to do exactly what we did for the chorus, for the verse, and play a split measure of C major to D major. Moving back into E minor again. You'll often see this in tablature books where the first, if it's repeated section, and the second repeat is slightly different. It'll be an indicator here of number 1, saying the first pass, play this bar here. Excuse me. And then on the second pass, we then move on to this instead, where we play 2 lots of F major. So there's an F major chord here. We've got repeat markers here, so you basically repeat the 2 bars of F. And the G here is an indicator that we move back into the verse. And this song is kind of has this formula in a way, really, where it goes back from verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, until the outro, which we'll come on to. So there's an interesting twist here with this chord in particular, which I'm going to overdub in a picture-in-picture when we demonstrate this now at the practice corner. So the chorus, I think it's a chorus of Live Forever, or the second half of the verse progression, if you like, is more or less the same. The strum pattern is exactly the same, roughly. Only this time we replace the G major chord with that of an E minor open chord. So this should take the shape of this, more or less, really, where we have all 6 strings we're attacking, and we have an open E. We then place the second and third fingers respectively on the A and D strings on the second fret to give us a B and an E note. And then all the other strings are open, giving us a G, B and E. One thing to bear in mind as well is that on the second pass, when we get to the turnaround to get back into the next verse section or the solo section, is rather than play the C, is Noel will then play an F chord. So that's worth bearing in mind when we do that, so after the A minor. So the F can be played as a bar chord. So remember our lesson of bar chords. We basically take the index finger and fret all the notes on the first fret using the thumb on the back of the fretboard as a support, and we then take our third finger and our fourth finger and place these on the third fret of the A and D strings, giving us the C and F note. Oops, beg your pardon. And finally, to get the major chord, we then place our second finger on the second fret of the G string, giving us the A note. And this together should sound like this. So when we apply that, so we'll do 2 passes, because the song at this point is 2 lots of them, with the second having the turnaround F chord to get us back into the G. So I will play all of that to demonstrate this to you. 3, 4, and... chorus section, if you like, to Live Forever. So for the final part of the song, when we move on to the final chorus, if you like, I know I'll put a verse on there, but I can't be bothered changing it now. Really, it's the chorus effectively. You should know by the fact that it's E minor. When we move on to the final lot of this, we have something similar that occurs. So for the first pass, we do exactly what we did before. C major to that of D major, and we repeat again. However, what happens here rather nicely is that after we've played the A minor on the second pass, rather than play this, we then come into the outro, where you have the outro solo, if you like, played over the top of that. And that basically is a shift between F major to A minor, back to F major, back to A minor. And this is repeated what feels like ad infinitum when played over the studio version. You can play it however many times you'd like. Usually they're in blocks of 4, so I'll probably demonstrate that in the practice corner as a block of 4. And there's a solo that goes over the top of this, but like I said, for now, just focus on keeping to that basic strumming pattern outlined, or anything that you've come up with. And as long as you stick to the tempo of the metronome you've set, then you can't really go wrong. So let's have a look at that at the practice corner. The final part of the song is the outro, where the progression alternates between an A minor chord and that of the F major chord, which is analogous to basically the turnaround of the chorus sections of the song, if you like. The strumming pattern is more or less roughly the same, and I think it goes on for, I don't know how long it goes on for, if you listen to the studio version and record that, or until you've had enough playing it when you're playing it with someone else, etc. But this should sound a lot like this when we play it 3, 4, and... That is the basic rhythm progression for Live Forever. So I do hope that makes it clearer. Like I said, it's one of my favourites to jam along to. If you have a friend who's more advanced, may want to play some lead stuff over that. For now, I just wanted to focus on getting the rhythm side sorted out with what we've discussed so far in terms of the previous season of Back to the Drawing Board and this current ongoing season of the Practice Corner. Or if you want to just practice changing chords as well, this is a fantastic song for doing this sort of thing with, in a way, really, and one of my all-time favourites in a way, really. And you know, it is very strange times we live in to have Oasis returning again this weekend as well, which I thought was somewhat befitting to look at this. In next week's episode, we'll look at another case study. Maybe it's perhaps something a bit more edgy and a bit more rocky that I moved on from Oasis when learning guitar myself. I already have something in mind, but I'll keep it a surprise. I hope the audio has improved. I have tried to, like I said, get the condenser mic in to get my vocals more clearer, although editing this is going to be a real pain in the arse, but okay, we'll have to work with what we've got. And like I said, any comments, you know, please feel to mention them down below, and like, dislike, whatever, you know, subscribe, unsubscribe, whatever, I don't care. It's been a while since I've done this, so yeah. And until then, keep on rocking.